Good morning, everyone. It's December 28th, 2019. Um, we are back with another video from the Crypto Insider compound, tucked safely away in the wonderful and weird city of Austin, Texas, um, where the barbecue is good. First thing we'll talk about today are our likes and subscribes. We got 30 new subscribers since yesterday, so that means 30 XRP to the Good Souls Group charities at Good XRP. They break it down for us and they send it off to all these wonderful places. There's Dog Rescue, Things for Children's, Vet, St. Jude's. They're a great organization that helps everyone out with that, so we appreciate what they do at the Good Souls Group. We're going to talk about some Dave Jevans clarification on the remarks. You'll see a lot of XRP YouTubers covered his remarks at a Japanese banking conference yesterday, and it was sort of developing into big news. I saw it, and I didn't think it was as big of a deal as the rest of the community was making it out to be, so we left it out of our video yesterday, and I'll show you why in a second. I'm just looking at the burn rate here for XRP. It's a weird statistic that I like to watch for some reason. It doesn't mean much, and it changes almost instantly. But what I want to do is go to Coinalyze and bring up our XRP price. So it looks like we're up 2.5% since yesterday. So a nice little bump. Still hasn't broken through any major goalposts that we can say we're in a trend reversal. But it's nice to see a lot of overboughts down here in the oscillators. That's good news. What else did I want to talk about? We're also going to get into the weeds a little bit. On the weekend, I am the crypto insider, meaning I do have some inside information occasionally that other YouTubers may not. So we're going to talk about mumps, and do Ripple partners have mumps? So if you like to get in the weeds with this sort of thing and get into a more philosophical or technical discussion, that's going to be for you. If not, you may want to tune out for the remainder of the video once we get there. Okay, so Dave Jevans. We have Moon Lambo, who's a great. I recommend following Moon Lambo if you've never heard of him. He's an XRP. I don't want to say advocate, but he is. He does the same things that I do. He does it very well, aggregating the news that he thinks is worthy. I really like this tweet from him. Could you please expand upon what you meant in this clip as far as most banks in Japan starting to work with XRP? This clip has generated a lot of buzz, and that's Moon Lambo reaching out for clarification, and that's a great thing to see rather than him just running with a title, something like all the banks in Japan are now using XRP. So that's appreciated. And Dave Jevans comes back and says, this is a remark I made at a Japanese conference in Tokyo and refers to Japanese banks. Working with means experimenting, evaluating, testing, or deploying. I did not say adopt. View the video. My comments reflect the Ripple offerings, not just XRP. So the comment does speak to XRP a little bit, but XRP in combination with the rest of the Ripple offerings, RippleNet, not all of them use ODL or have to use ODL, and that's important. As we talked about before, the price levels that we're at cannot facilitate every bank in the world using XRP today. I mean, if it did, it would be a disaster. People would be fighting for XRP. I mean, it would definitely drive the price up, but in a very, very ugly and unrefined way. And what I said in a previous video is a lot of these banks working with means experimenting, evaluating, testing, or deploying. A lot goes into deploying anything in a major banking environment. And so many things do not make it to the final stage for whatever reason. Yeah, I've seen numerous things affect the rollout of this or that project in the fintech world. Anything from scandal to just budget cuts, anything that you can think of can definitely affect the price of rolling out or adopting a new project. Um, just doing a little research on check files. We did the Ripple price analysis. Okay, so now is our discussion about getting into the weeds with mumps. What is mumps? Um, so in the USA, uh, a lot of uh, many huge financial institutions and healthcare institutions have built their core banking platforms on a system that runs off of mumps. That was the old word for it, and nowadays we just call it M. And if you're a computer programmer and you've never heard of M, don't worry. It doesn't mean that you're a bad programmer. It's just a weird area that not a lot of people get into and not a lot of people are exposed to. It's not like JavaScript or Python or C++ or anything like that. It's its own world. And the way mumps works is that it's a language and a series of relational databases. Usually they're called globals, and information as it comes in is stored in these globals. As the core makes, and when I talk about core, we're talking about DDA retail banking, which is your CDs, your bank accounts, your checking accounts, money market accounts. And a core banking platform does exactly what you think it would do. It adds and it subtracts really well. It figures out interest. You can offer lending products. It does the core work. We're not talking about the GUIs, the nice things that the tellers log into to view what's happening on the core. That's an interface. I'm talking about the actual meat and potatoes of these banks. Now, M language is very old. Mumps is very old. It came out in the 70s, I believe, maybe even the late 60s. If you want to know more about mumps, you can look it up. And the Wikipedia probably has way more information than I do on mumps. But I bring it up because at the time, and for a long time after, and still now, it is, for being as old as it is, it's a very fast way to transact or to process large amounts of transaction and large amounts of data. So, in fact, it set records even in the 90s and the 2000s, 40, 50 years after it's made, which you cannot say about a lot of programming languages. Uh, but it relies, and these companies, these Ripple partners, and I don't want to go into mentioning specific names, but big banks, any big bank that you've ever heard advertise on the radio or television, they all pretty much choose their core because they don't build it, they don't make it themselves. They generally choose it from one or two big providers, massive financial institutions. And these are, these are places that somebody like think of any big bank, Goldman Sachs or Charles Schwab will go to and say, hey, we would like to explore your core offerings and see if they're right for us. They go to these technology companies and, then they hash it out. But I'm talking about mumps because they are the cores are structured so that they run on schedulers in what's called batch processing. Batch processing means, a file will come in full of information, like maybe in clearings or check files or float files from the Fed or wherever they come from. When the job scheduler hits, it'll look for that file. If it's there, it'll process it. If not, it'll start sending out warnings and start retrying. Uh, and where was I going with all this? So, um, so the batch processing requires you don't want fresh transactions to be coming in at the same time you're trying to do accruals and posting these batch files that have come in. And there's a lot more files. There's tons of different files for different reasons. But you don't want to do both, sort of. You don't want to try be posting that Joe's check while the accruals for the day or some other huge process is still running. So they'll go into what's called a storing mode. Some places call it store and forward. That means any new transactions that come in while this day and batch process is running, they get stored in a buffer zone. And as soon as the time is right, as all the day's work has stopped processing, those transactions will release, and then you can then begin posting them. So it's why you may see some delays sometimes if you use let's say you use a card somewhere and you go and check your bank account and it's not immediately available. It could be that the institutions are in store and forward mode, or some other things going on. It could be a million reasons. So I don't want to say that for a certainty, but where I'm getting at is, we get these check files, and we assign the hold to them based on the bank's requirements. Now, those requirements have gotten more standardized over the years with things like Check 21. They're very regulatory wise, the government's very conscious about how long you can put a hold on an actual paper check or the AC. A lot of places now they'll turn a check into an ACH, and which is like an electronic transaction. Just for ease of processing, you don't have to deal with the paper. You can use what's called an IRD or an image replacement device. But that's why if you're ever looking at your statement for a check that you wrote and it says image not available or image not found, or it just skips it entirely, it's probably because whoever you wrote that check to, the payee, probably turned it into an ACH transaction for faster processing. In any case, there are a lot of opportunities for blockchain technology for things like XRP and Ripple to take a look at. Just, we talk about cross-border payments in the XRP community because it's what Ripple has put their focus on. And keep in mind, Ripple in fintech is a relatively small company. They only have 500 or so employees. And so they have to really try to narrow their focus into a few areas just because there's not enough people to do all the work. Ripple used this technology used to its fullest in every facet of banking. They could go from 500 employees to 30,000 employees because, like I said, you're assigning holds because people wrote a check. You could also work to establish some sort of intermediary, that instead of turning these checks into ACH, they're turned into blockchain transactions and they're instantly done. You can't write hot checks at this point. Check kiting is not a thing. It's completely destroyed. Check kiting is a form of check fraud. I'm not going to explain it, but it's also called playing the float. So that's just one instance. These transactions that are all stuck in store and forward mode, Um, a lot of those probably could be eliminated with Ripple technology. Now, I work in the very traditional banking markets, uh, and I don't claim to know every product that Ripple Net offers or that Ripple has to offer. But I can see my industry and say is so much potential. If not for Ripple, for someone else to come in and say, we can definitely speed things up. We can take the pain out of a lot of these transactions, and we can basically get to a point where we're processing in real time, and this batch processing is over with, or a good percentage is over with. Now, some things are fine to process in batch. So a lot of things that come out of the core are also files, and there'll be things like, let's say you passed your cycle, or you changed your address. So the core automatically flags you as having changed your address, and they'll want to send a letter out to you confirming that, or they'll want to send a statement out because your 30-day cycle date is hit, so they're going to send you a statement. Now, those things are not as groundbreaking. We can send those in a batch, and it generally works pretty well, and doesn't require a need for blockchain. But when we're talking about the financial aspect of banking and holds, is where I think Ripple or using XRP or whatever products they have could really shine. So we talk, the YouTube community in general talks about ODL this and ODL that, and it's great, and I understand it's the focus of Ripple, but I just don't want people to think this is all there is, or this is all it can do. You see the Spring platform, and what's his name, Ethan Beard, with Coil and the smart contracts. Smart contracts are also very interesting to me because it definitely could help eliminate a lot of pain. Like let's say that you want to buy a house in the USA, and I don't know if any of my listeners or subscribers have ever bought a house, but it's usually a huge to do with applying for, getting a mortgage, satisfying all these requirements, having the inspections done, having money put into escrow and good faith money and earnest money, and who's gonna give X% back in closing costs. It's a pretty complicated transaction that'll end up with you signing until you have carpal tunnel syndrome hundreds and hundreds of times, and they keep getting it a little better. But basically, all these requirements have to be satisfied before the deed of that property can be transferred. Well, imagine with a smart contract technology where once all these requirements are satisfied, the whole financial piece is taken care of. The money automatically moves. You don't have to go to a title company and sit down and sign all the documents in the same way that you generally do now. I mean, it's getting better. There are a lot of title companies where you can do a lot of things online and sign documents electronically. But as far as holding money in escrow and funding loans and waiting for underwriters, that sort of thing, I think smart contracts may also have some very good utility there. The problem is, like I said, where does Ripple start? There's an ocean of stuff they can do with blockchain technology and or XRP. So when we talk about utility, I try not to talk about it from the aspect of just there being on-demand liquidity and cross-border payment. Granted, it's a huge market and it makes sense to tackle that one first, but there are some other really big markets where they could definitely look into getting some footholds, and some of them may not pan out. I don't know. I'm not at the top of the food chain by any stretch. But I've worked in the space long enough to see where there's pain and where there's hangups and where there's delays and where there's at least potential to be helped. So hopefully that happens. Anyways, That's our sort of in the weeds discussion for a Saturday. We thank you all for listening. We thank you for subscribing. We love it, and we'll see you soon.